Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Spiritual Metaphysics 101. My name is Yaakov and I'm your host. Today we're going to be talking about my spiritual path, and one that I like to introduce to viewers as often as I can, and that's A Course in Miracles. Is this a good shot of A Course in Miracles book? People can see it clearly. This is one of several editions. This happens to be the second edition, and it's the pocket edition. There is a third edition out which has supplemental material in it. And we'd like to start today with the introduction to A Course in Miracles. So I'm going to read from A Course in Miracles introduction, comment on that, and then we'll go to a later chapter in the text on atonement. So these are kind of the topics for this episode: the introduction to A Course in Miracles, and then the subject of atonement and acceptance of salvation, so that we know the peace and serenity of God. So here's the introduction. This is A Course in Miracles. It is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. Free will does not mean that you can establish the curriculum. It means only that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. The course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. The opposite of love is fear, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. Next paragraph. This course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way, quote, "Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God." End of the introduction. Well, let me make some comments about that, and then we'll go to chapter 9 on the atonement. It says this is A Course in Miracles. Now, that does not mean your everyday garden variety type of miracle where things in the physical world seem to change magically. Water into wine, somebody walking on the water, somebody defying gravity, somebody healing a sick body simply by touching them. This would all be examples of a physical manifestation of something that is unexplainable. The Course describes a miracle as a change of mind, not something in the world at the bodily or physical level. A change of mind, and again, this is not the brain, but we're talking about the spiritual mind. The spiritual mind can be changed when each of us who possess a mind makes a decision to shift from fear-based, ego-based thinking to love-based, spiritual thinking. And when that shift, that decision is made to go from ego-fear to spiritual love, then the miracle of peace and serenity that passes all understanding then is experienced. And that is the miracle. And it also shifts our perception of the physical world, because once my mind is attuned to love rather than fear, I then see everything lovingly. Whether it was something that seemed to threaten me or something that was pleasurable, it doesn't matter. All things are seen through love and are transcended. So the pain, the suffering, the fear is all passed by and transcended. Love transcends everything. Love is whole and complete and changeless. So, for instance, if I see somebody who seems threatening, if I'm in my right mind and loving, then I see them calling for help. And I would extend that love that originates within my mind from the Spirit. So it goes on, and so this is the definition, so to speak, of a miracle, a change in mind, which then shifts the observer's perception from fear to love. And all things are seen with loving thoughts rather than fearful thoughts. And people are simply expressing love back to me, or they're calling for help, and they're calling for love. Next it says it's a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. Well, this is a little tricky. I think what the Course is saying here is this is a universal curriculum of love. So it is a required course, whether you take the form of the universal curriculum as a Course in Miracles, or you take the universal curriculum of love through Buddhism, or Taoism, or Hinduism, or mystical Christianity, or Kabbalah. It doesn't matter. The universal curriculum has many expressions in form. That would be in, let's say, sacred texts. But the content of the universal curriculum is always love. And so that's rather simple, but it's what it means by it's a required course. You have to take the universal curriculum. What fits for you, and it might be 12-step recovery work, is basically spiritual 12 steps steeped in love. Any number. You could be a secularist and still believe in humanitarianism and love of your fellow human beings. All of that is the required course, not this particular book. And then it says, but the time that you take it is up to you. And that is voluntary, because we have free will. God created us. God is a creating, loving source. And in the creation, like and as himself, we have the power to decide. And we have free will. So we can take the course, this universal curriculum, now, or in the three-dimensional world of time and space. It seems that we're going to wait and take it some other time later on. These are all either conscious or subconscious decisions, I grant you that. However, we're trying to bring everything up to a level of awareness where we can make a lucid decision and say, now is the time, and the universal curriculum is my path. And then the universal curriculum is presented in a way that is most resonant for each one of us. This is entirely resonant for me, and I'm just so grateful that I found A Course in Miracles. You, on the other hand, may find the universal course embodied in so many other. There are thousands of paths back to the peace of God. Next it says, free will does not mean that you can establish the curriculum. Well, we've already talked about that. That is the universal curriculum of love. It only means that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. So again, we're bringing up to our awareness the possibility and the reality that we are decision makers, and we get to choose what is preeminent in our mind. Now, I can choose that which is most preeminent in my mind is the external world, and I'm attached to it, and I'm enmeshed with it. Relationships, finances, accomplishments, competition, politics, you name it. Well, I don't think, and it's been my experience, that those perceptive attachments in the world are not steeped in love. So it's not part of the universal curriculum. That doesn't mean that I can't go within and make a decision for the loving part of my mind, the Holy Spirit, Jesus, the Tao, the Buddha, Krishna, and decide to see politically or economically or relationship-wise, in marriage, with my children, as a father. All of that can be seen with the perceptive miracle of the universal curriculum of love. So, but then it says the Course doesn't aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. What it means here is that we are love. We're made in the likeness and image of our Creator, which is love. So we don't have to learn the definition of it or the meaning of it. But what it says then is, but we do have to learn how to remove the blocks to the awareness of this all-present love. We have to remove the blocks to the awareness of its presence. So this is what we're doing through A Course in Miracles. And I think through any other discipline and practice where your mind goes through a purification training and you're undoing the attachments to that which is outside of you, seemingly, and made through the ego and the fear, rather than created on the inside in the mind through the Godhead, the universal intelligence, which is the creative power of love. So that shift, once it's been made, doesn't have to be explained. You experience it. You know it. And if you've ever had a transcendent experience, if you ever had a revelatory experience, if you've ever had an out-of-body experience or a near-death experience where you experience the love, you know that it's indefinable. It is just so personal and beyond words, which are symbols of the thing itself. It's not love. It would be words which are symbols of the love. So, okay, we want to remove the blocks to the experience of love's presence and its awareness, which is our natural inheritance. That's who we are. And then it says the opposite of love is fear. But that which is all-encompassing, love, really can't have any opposite. So fear really is not real. This is one of the paradoxes that we become more adept at handling and allowing in the receiving of the universal curriculum. Certainly, if we're learning that fear is the opposite of love, but love is all-encompassing, so it can't have an opposite, we have a paradox there. There's a seeming contradiction, but only in a dualistic view that the world presents. It's either this or it's that. You can't have both. Okay, I understand that, but simply by choosing this doesn't mean that the other doesn't exist. Well, it certainly does at the level of metaphysics. Now, at the level of physics, two things cannot, be in the same place at the same time. We understand that. Only one thing can be in that place, but the other thing can be in a different place. Well, this is the difference, if you will, between metaphysics and physics, or the physical world. In the world of metaphysics, everything is one. It's a unified plane of consciousness. So everything is one. It doesn't have an opposite. And that which is all-encompassing, which is love, is all unified and it's all one. We've only manufactured in our own ego fearful thoughts that love has an opposite. And I won't go into the Course in Miracles story, if you will, behind why dualism and the fall from grace and the idea of separation came about. Suffice it to say that that only exists in a three-dimensional view. Metaphysically and at the unified level of consciousness, that doesn't happen at all. The whole idea of time and space is another example. You have time and you have space. Space changes based on the linear change in time. Well, that doesn't happen in metaphysics where everything is eternal. So there is no time and things don't change. So these are little nuances, if you will, that become very important as you become more and more aware and awakened to your true identity as love, rather than a dualistic split mind between love and fear. Sometimes you love, sometimes you're fearful and judgmental. That is a false identity. And as the Course says, when you're truly aware of the cause of your existence, which is love, and that you are an extension inseparable from that cause, then you know there's no dualism. You are one with the Creator. You and the Father are one. I and the Father are one. And what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. So we want to remove these false blocks, these false images, because they really aren't true. And then it says, just in, as it says here, summing it all up, nothing real can be threatened. Your identity on that unified field of consciousness is invulnerable, and nothing can threaten it. Your identity as a real extension of the expressive power of God's love is forever in existence. Not as ego, not as personality, not as body, not as your history. What it means, and of course this becomes more and more clear as we study A Course in Miracles, is the experience of love, which we already decided, based on this introduction, cannot be defined. You just experience the bliss. You experience the transcendent joy and light of being an expression of love. The body, on the other hand, nothing unreal exists. Nothing real can be threatened. That unified spirit and consciousness that we are of love, and nothing unreal, the body and the world, the seeming separations of dualism, does not exist. Herein lies the peace of God. So, this is the introduction. And parenthetically, it doesn't mean that you give up your everyday life and say, well, everything is unreal, so why even engage in life? The Course gives you a very clear way and a journey and a purpose while you still seem to experience being in a body, in a world of other bodies, in a physical universe of time and space. So, and just to let you know from an overview what transcends that sense of being physical in a world of separation is love. When you turn your mind and your heart towards the love that is our all true identity in unification, then the experience and the normality of everyday life becomes joyful. And it becomes, as the Course says, a happy dream, and you become a happy dreamer. It doesn't say that things become any more real, they're still illusory. But it's a wonderful way to experience that which is seemingly your life while you're giving up what seems to be your life in favor of the reality of your identity as one with everything. That would be far too frightening, if you will, if we were to just try and do that in an instant. But we do it in a process, an interlocking chain, if you will, of forgiveness experiences. One experience of forgiveness heightens my awareness of unification. Another interlocking experience of forgiveness, of love, heightens my experience of unification. And so it goes until, as the Course says, we're in the real world. The real world is above the physical universe of duality. And there I see everything lovingly and as one with me, and I'm one with it. And then the final step back to heaven, where, you know, there is no subject and object at all, even through the lens of forgiveness. That final step is taken by God, and we're taken back home. And we all go at the same time. Nobody leaves until the last slave is freed. This is part of the teaching. And so we want to forgive everybody as soon as we're able and as quickly as we remember. Jesus says in the Course in Miracles, my brother, choose again. Choose, you know, from that ego position of judgment to the loving spiritual thought of forgiveness, and choose again for that as quickly as you can. Because in that interlocking chain of forgiveness experiences, all minds are joined, and so all minds are healing. And since it's all happening outside of time, there is an existential unification and an ascension, very much parallel to what Jesus experienced on the cross. Excuse me, after the crucifixion, where his soul symbolically was ascended into heaven and the body was laid aside. Now that message is very critical, because it demonstrated a radical example of what you and I are going through as we become enlightened and heighten our awareness. The body is gently used for forgiveness and as a communication tool until we all experience the atonement and we are brought back to the real world and then wake up in heaven, which is a place that we've never left. We've only been dreaming of exile. So, mentioning the atonement, I want to go to the next part of this episode, and I understand we only have a few minutes, so this may be a two-part episode, and I hope some of you will have a chance to experience the whole thing with us. But we're going to discuss the atonement now. So let me turn to chapter 9, the acceptance of the atonement. And this particular chapter in A Course in Miracles begins with the acceptance of the atonement, the acceptance of reality. And this is chapter 9. It says, fear of the will of God is one of the strangest beliefs the human mind has ever made. So fear of the will of God, this would be the all-encompassing, all-present love that in an ego state of mind we're afraid of. It seems to us when we're in that unreal state of mind of ego and fear that God's love presents a threat. The threat of annihilation to me and to you individually as a separate being. A body, a personality, a history, preferences, standards, likes and dislikes. The whole dualistic view is threatened by God's all-encompassing love when we're in that frame of mind. But keep in mind that we discussed from the introduction that we can make a decision to remove these blocks to the awareness of love's presence. So we have to identify a block. The major block to the awareness of love's presence is the fear of the will of God. And there's a section in here called the obstacles to peace where it's clearly identified that we're afraid of God's love. We're also not interested in peace. We would much rather have the drama and the dualistic dissension that the ego thrives on. This, in an insane perspective, keeps our identity in mind. And if the identity as separate and unique and individual is kept in mind, then we think we exist. Contrary to the reality that we are simply love and unified at that level of consciousness with everybody and everything. Well, again, the acceptance of the atonement, we want to identify the obstacle, the fear of the will of God. And then it says, the reason for this course is that you do not know what you are. So we're starting another inquiry into a block to the awareness of love's presence. Do I really know my identity? No. The Course makes that very clear. And I want to mention that there are workbook lessons as the second part of the Course in Miracles. And that is the experiential part of the application of the text. It's very important that we use these workbook lessons in our everyday lives. And there are 365 of them, one for each day of the year. Because the abstract theory in and of itself is basically useless unless it becomes a practical application in our everyday lives. And the workbook lessons give us the purification process and the discipline. You know, the Course says that an undisciplined mind can accomplish nothing. So we want to develop that discipline. Well, it goes on here, it says, we've emphasized many times that the Holy Spirit, which is a Christian term, but really it's the spiritual center in your mind, which could be any higher power, love of your understanding, God of your understanding. So it's emphasized the Holy Spirit will never call upon you to sacrifice anything. Well, here's a reference to our fear of God's will. We feel that it will annihilate us. And here the Course is saying, don't worry about sacrificing your identity. This is a process that'll happen over what you seem to experience as time, and nothing beyond your willingness to experience the process of forgiveness and atonement will happen. You will not be whisked away against your will. Remember that God created us in His image with free will, so we can create contrary to God's will, but then we're keeping ourselves in a state of fear. Then it says it's impossible to communicate in alien tongues. You and your Creator, God of your understanding, can communicate through creation. This would be the extension of love and forgiveness, because that and only that is your true joint will. That is your joint will. You may insist that the Holy Spirit does not answer you, but it might be wiser to consider the kind of questioner that you are. So this is an interesting thought. If we're engaging in standard prayer where we're asking the Holy Spirit or God of our understanding to change something in the illusory world, the three-dimensional world, certainly the answers are not going to be forthcoming, and we're going to feel frustrated because the Holy Spirit does not come into the dream and change the dream. Of course, it's very clear that at the level of creation, the mind must be changed. And it says, seek not to change the world, but seek to change your thinking and your mind about the world. That's where the Holy Spirit will answer our questions, our prayers. And it would be something to the effect, God, I feel afraid of such and such, fill in the blank. And I want to give that fear up to you. And I'm choosing you over the seeming cause of the fear out there. Help me to know the peace of God. And I want to know that peace beyond all else. And I mean that beyond all else. And when that happens, then the prayer is automatically answered because I'm willing to give up my fear and I'm willing to seek the guidance of the Holy Spirit. That is the atonement principle in operation. And that is the forgiveness principle and the love of our identity through the source of love in operation in the seeming world, three-dimensional world of separate bodies in time and space. Well, okay, that I think will take us as far as we want to go in this particular section of the acceptance of the atonement. We're running out of time. I do want to thank everybody most sincerely for joining us. And on a personal note, I want to share how being with everybody on these shows for the last 3 years, I think we've been doing it now, and we have 125, this is the 126th episode, and all the work that I think you and I have been doing has really been paying off. And maybe in the next episode I'll go into a little bit about some of the things that are changing in my life as a reflection of the changing of my mind and the undoing of the fear of God's will and the correction of the guilt that comes when I resist God's will. It's been a wonderful experience these past 3 years, and I want to thank the NECAT network and everybody affiliated with the TV station and with the audience, and my lovely wife who's the producer of the show and sets everything up. Thank you so much. And as the Course in Miracles reminds us, you are as God created you. Namaste, shalom, and peace. And we'll see you next time. Bye now.